This is the Deseret News National Edition, when your family needs to know more.
Good morning and welcome to our program. I'm Dave McCann. The American Enterprise Institute is one of the most respected center-right think tanks in our nation's capital. Much of the Institute's work has focused on free market economics and a muscular foreign policy instead of domestic social issues. AEI President Arthur C. Brooks sat down with Paul Edwards, editor of the Deseret News, and discussed capitalism, faith, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, Arthur, very pleased to have you here with us in our studios here at the Deseret News.
Wonderful to be here, Paul. Thank you.
In your recent book, The Road to Freedom, you try to lay out what you call the moral case for capitalism, or for free enterprise.
For free enterprise, right.
And, you know, as I think about the people who may have felt or experienced some of the problems from something like the collapse of the housing bubble, or who are feeling the effects of what some people are calling the hollowing out of the middle class. I would suspect that many of them may see free enterprise as amoral at best, and perhaps unfair and even immoral because of the kind of social inequality that some people perceive as coming from our capitalist system. So is there really a moral case for free enterprise? I mean, capitalism may be super efficient in its allocation of resources, but is there really a moral case?
Well, there has to be a moral case for any economic system. And the reason is because economics is a big part of our lives. And if we're moral creatures, if we're endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, which the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence tells us, and one of those is the pursuit of happiness, then when we're going about our ordinary lives, when we're going about the vocations of our work lives, that involves economics. There better be a moral case for it. If we don't have a moral case for the way that we conduct our economic lives, shame on us. We're going to do a lot of things wrong. Now, to your point, a lot of people think we did a lot of things wrong, and a lot of things did in fact go wrong. But the balance of the evidence suggests that it's not that we had too much free enterprise, it's that we didn't have enough. We had too much crony capitalism, we had too much bad regulation, we had too much corruption, too much amorality and greed. We had too little of this adventure of people being rewarded for their merit and their hard work, too little earned success that could actually be even shared with people who are poor. So the moral case for capitalism, the moral case for free enterprise is sharing this ethos of a great adventure where we can help each other, we can be rewarded for hard work, merit, and innovation, and making sure that everybody can share in that, including the poor in this country.
You talked about the pursuit of happiness, and I know that this has been a real interest of yours, the social scientific study of happiness.
Yeah.
And I think you admit that roughly half of happiness might come from a genetic predisposition that we have in some way, and another chunk may come from how recent events occur to us in some way.
Right.
So there's a small slice that's open to our agency. So as we think about this idea in the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness, what does national policy have to do with this small slice of freedom that we have to do something about our own happiness?
Well, national policy is important, but the most important thing is our culture. This is the thing that we have to remember. You know, when you go to Washington, D.C., which you lived there for years and I live there now, and for those folks who are watching us, I don't necessarily recommend that you do that. I mean, I live there, so people watching us don't have to, kind of. And the thing that people forget in Washington, D.C. is that it's not all about policy. It's not all about politics. It's not all about what policymakers are doing or not doing. It really starts in our own hearts, in our own families, in our own churches, in our own communities. This is an intensely private country, and that's extremely important. The most important thing is culture, and the cultural variables that lie behind a happier life are fourfold: faith, family, community, and work. If we understand work not as just a way to make money, no. It's a way of understanding the formation of life, the shape that comes to life, the meaning that comes from having a vocation where we can serve others and indeed serve our country and serve our whole community. That's what work is supposed to be. But if we remember first that faith, family, community, and work are the basis of a good life, then we can form policy that, simply put, doesn't get in the way of those things. The best way that the government can actually help happiness is by not creating unhappiness. And the way to do that is to not get in the way of our faith lives, to not make it harder to form traditional, strong families, to not fragment communities, and for goodness sake, not get in the way of incentives for people to work and to create jobs and to do a lot with their own lives. That's what national policy needs to do, to take those 4 factors into account, and then we'll be actually complying with this desire, this visionary aim that we had from Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence, to actually let everybody define and pursue their happiness.
Arthur, the American Enterprise Institute is known for a lot of work on things like economic policy and foreign policy. It was interesting to me to see that you recently hosted His Holiness the Dalai Lama for a few days at the American Enterprise Institute. So I'm curious, what is the relevance of faith in our national culture and dialogue, and what should it be?
Well, you can't look at the history of the United States without understanding that fundamentally the United States is a country that has so many of its values and so much of its history bound up in the idea of faith, so many faiths, the multiplicity of faiths, the pluralism that allows all of us to pursue the faith that is in our hearts, that we believe is given to us by God. It's funny, we talk about this free market economy, but the truth of the matter is one of the great sources of our strength is the free market for souls. It's almost as if, the fact that you can worship and I can worship and nobody tells us what's legal and what's illegal, notwithstanding, a long tradition of difficulties along the way, that we've been able to get where we are today. That's one of the greatest sources of our strength. So understanding freedom means understanding faith in this country. We can't have a country that gets away from that expects to have the pursuit of happiness as we traditionally understand that. Well, this is an important opportunity for us at the American Enterprise Institute to talk to people that are religious leaders. So we've had the most important guru in India, for example, has 300 million followers. His name is Sri Ravi Shankar. And you mentioned that we had the Dalai Lama, who is, according to public opinion polling, the most respected religious leader who currently lives in the world today. It's really quite something. I visited him first in India last year. I went to his home in Dharamsala, which is on the Tibetan border in the Himalayan foothills. He's been exiled there since 1959 when he had to flee the Chinese persecution of the Tibetans and the Buddhists. Mm-hmm. And I went to visit him there and we talked about the idea of a collaboration. What if we had a large conversation about the morality of free enterprise, about the important link between faith and a good life? He was really interested in the idea and came and spent several days with us at AEI. And this is what we talked about. I mean, we had people from all different faiths there, people from all different political viewpoints there. And probably the greatest thing was that we created with that conversation was confusion. So, we got Vanity Fair magazine, which is an old magazine. It's not traditionally associated with the free enterprise movement. It has as a headline, "What was the Dalai Lama doing at the right-wing American Enterprise Institute?" And this is you want people to question their assumptions about what all of our values can and should be. But we got a lot out of the conversation. And one of the key things that we got out was basically we figured out a way that we could describe a formula for a better life, notwithstanding your politics and notwithstanding your particular religion. And first we started with, what's wrong with the world today? What's wrong with the, when you talk about from the financial crisis to the malaise on our college campuses, what is it? And basically it's this materialistic formula that's pumped out of Hollywood and from television, from Madison Avenue. And basically it's a formula that says, you want a better life? Use people and love things. That's what we hear all the time. And if you're going to worship something, worship yourself. Right? That's the wrong formula, as we discussed with the Dalai Lama. The right formula, use things, love people, worship God. If we can only follow this formula, then we actually have the secret to happiness, and that was the point of the collaboration.
One of your colleagues, Norm Ornstein, so a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, has written a book, co-authored a book, with the title, "It's Worse Than It Looks." I think that's, and it's talking about gridlock in Washington, right, and how our constitutional system, built in the 18th century, has now collided with a kind of politics of extremism that's created an untenable, dysfunctional Congress. Is it worse than it looks? And are you optimistic or pessimistic about where our nation is headed?
Well, I'm always optimistic. And the reason is because you never bet against America. I mean, if you do, you lose generation after generation. Now, there are threats, and there are things that are dysfunctional, there are things that are wrong, and there is a lot of gridlock, and there is an inability of people to talk to each other. But let's keep it in perspective. I travel all over the world, and so do you. And notwithstanding the fact that Republicans and Democrats don't get along very well in Washington right now, and notwithstanding the fact that I run a big institution that was not especially supportive of the reelection of Barack Obama in the main, there was no knock in the night. There was no jackbooted thug. This country is entirely peaceful and has hundreds of years of uncontested democratic elections. This is an incredible thing. It may be even worse than it looks in some parochial DC sense. It's not worse than it looks in a worldwide sense. This is still a democracy. This is still a free country. And despite the fact that Democrats and Republicans disagree a lot on policy and can't get a lot done, they still love their country, and we're still neighbors with each other. And I'm really grateful for that.
Arthur, thank you so much for being with us today at the Deseret News.
Thank you, Paul.
Paul Edwards, editor of the Deseret News, and Arthur Brooks. Next, most news outlets consider suicide taboo, but prevention experts want journalists to discuss it more. As you'll see, the key is teaching them how to do it responsibly when the Deseret News National Edition continues.